The defiant stomp that would shatter Frank Sinatra's control over his family echoed through Reprise Records on February 1, 1966. Nancy Sinatra, dressed in a short skirt and go-go boots that would have horrified her father, delivered the line that would end his authority forever. "These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are going to walk all over you." Lee Hazlewood, the producer who had transformed Frank's little girl into a sultry sex symbol, watched as Nancy recorded the most defiant song in popular music, a song that wasn't just about leaving a man, but about a daughter leaving her father's shadow and control. "Nancy, you can't release this," Frank had screamed during their final confrontation at his Palm Springs compound just days earlier. "This isn't who you are. This isn't who I raised you to be. You're my daughter, not some cheap nightclub singer in a miniskirt." But Nancy Sinatra was done being Frank's obedient daughter. At 25, she was ready to choose her career over family approval, independence over safety, and her own artistic vision over her father's traditional values. The rebellion that would make "These Boots Are Made for Walkin" a worldwide hit was about to destroy the most important relationship in both their lives. What started as a father's attempt to protect his daughter's reputation would become a generational war that exposed the impossible pressures of being Frank Sinatra's child while trying to forge an independent identity in the rapidly changing world of 1960s popular culture. If you're fascinated by the hidden family dramas behind Frank Sinatra's public image, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This is the story of how America's most famous father lost control of his daughter forever. The Good Daughter Years, 1940 to 1963. Nancy Sandra Sinatra had spent the first 25 years of her life being exactly what Frank wanted: the perfect daughter of America's greatest entertainer. Born on June 8, 1940, Nancy grew up understanding that her behavior reflected on her father's reputation, and that disappointing Frank Sinatra was unthinkable for anyone in the family. Frank had specific ideas about how his daughter should look, behave, and present herself to the world. Nancy was expected to be elegant, conservative, and dignified, a reflection of the class and sophistication that Frank wanted associated with the Sinatra name. Short skirts, provocative songs, and anything that suggested sexuality were absolutely forbidden. Nancy was raised to be a lady in the old-fashioned sense, recalled family friend Sammy Kahn. Frank wanted his daughter to represent everything refined and respectable about the Sinatra family. He was incredibly protective and controlling about her image and behavior. Throughout her childhood and teenage years, Nancy rarely challenged her father's authority. She attended the right schools, dated approved young men, and avoided any behavior that might create scandal or embarrass the family. When Nancy showed interest in singing, Frank initially encouraged it as long as she performed appropriate material in suitable venues. Nancy's early recording attempts in the late 1950s and early 1960s were unsuccessful precisely because they followed Frank's vision of who his daughter should be. The sweet, conventional pop songs she recorded lacked personality and failed to connect with audiences who were increasingly interested in more authentic and rebellious musical expressions. By 1963, Nancy's singing career was stagnating, and she was becoming increasingly frustrated with the limitations her father's expectations placed on her artistic development. She wanted to explore different musical styles and create her own identity, rather than remaining forever in Frank's shadow. The turning point came when Nancy met Lee Hazlewood, a producer and songwriter who saw potential in Nancy that Frank had never recognized. Hazlewood understood that Nancy could be successful, but only if she was allowed to develop an image and sound that was completely different from her father's traditional approach. Frank initially approved of Hazlewood's involvement, assuming that any producer would naturally respect the Sinatra family's standards for appropriate entertainment. Frank had no idea that Hazlewood was planning a complete transformation that would turn his obedient daughter into a symbol of 1960s female rebellion. The transformation begins, 1964 to 1965. Lee Hazlewood's plan for Nancy Sinatra was revolutionary. Transform Frank's conservative daughter into a sexy, confident woman who could compete with the emerging female artists of the mid-1960s. The transformation would require not just new songs and arrangements, but a complete reinvention of Nancy's image and public persona. Hazlewood understood that Nancy's previous failures were due to her attempts to sing like a traditional pop vocalist in the style her father preferred. Instead, Hazlewood wanted Nancy to develop a distinctive sound that emphasized her natural speaking voice and projected confidence and attitude rather than technical perfection. The image transformation was even more dramatic. Hazlewood encouraged Nancy to wear shorter skirts, higher boots, and more form-fitting clothing that emphasized her figure rather than hiding it behind the conservative outfits Frank preferred. The new look was designed to appeal to young audiences who were rejecting their parents' conservative values. Lee was giving Nancy permission to be sexy and confident in ways that Frank would never allow, observed music journalist Robert Christgau. Hazlewood understood that Nancy needed to rebel against her father's image of her if she was going to succeed as an independent artist. Nancy initially hesitated to embrace Hazlewood's vision completely, knowing that her father would be furious about the image transformation. However, her previous career failures and her growing frustration with being controlled made her increasingly willing to risk Frank's disapproval for the chance at genuine artistic success. The first signs of Nancy's transformation appeared in her 1965 recordings, which featured more assertive vocals and suggestive lyrics than anything she had attempted previously. Frank noticed the changes, but initially dismissed them as temporary experimentation that Nancy would abandon once she realized the importance of maintaining family standards. Frank's attitude began to change when he saw photographs from Nancy's recording sessions and promotional shoots. The images showed his daughter in outfits and poses that Frank considered inappropriate for a member of his family. For the first time, Frank realized that Nancy's new direction might represent a genuine challenge to his authority. The confrontation that Frank had been avoiding became inevitable when Hazlewood presented Nancy with "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'," a song that would force her to choose between her father's approval and her career independence once and for all. These Boots, the Ultimate Rebellion, January 1966. When Lee Hazlewood played "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'" for Nancy in January 1966, both of them understood that recording the song would represent a complete break from everything Frank Sinatra expected from his daughter. The song was defiant, sexual, and designed to appeal to exactly the audiences that Frank wanted Nancy to avoid. The lyrics were unmistakably about female empowerment and sexual confidence. A woman telling a man that she was leaving him and wouldn't tolerate being mistreated. In the context of Nancy's relationship with her father, the song took on additional meaning as a daughter's declaration of independence from parental control. Nancy knew that "these boots" would infuriate her father, recalled Hazlewood years later. But she also understood that the song represented everything she wanted to say about being her own person. She had to choose between making her father happy and making herself successful. Nancy's decision to record the song represented more than just career ambition. It was a generational statement about young women's rights to make their own choices about sexuality, career, and personal presentation. The song embodied everything that was changing in American culture during the 1960s, particularly the growing independence of young women from traditional family expectations. The recording session itself was emotionally charged, with Nancy delivering vocals that expressed not just the song's message, but her own frustration with years of being controlled and limited by her father's expectations. The famous snarling delivery of the title line captured Nancy's anger about being treated as a child rather than an adult woman with her own artistic vision. Nancy knew that releasing These Boots would create a permanent rift with her father, but she had reached the point where artistic independence was more important than family harmony. She was tired of being Frank Sinatra's good daughter and ready to become Nancy Sinatra, the independent artist. The song was recorded in late January 1966, but Nancy delayed telling her father about it, knowing that Frank would attempt to prevent its release if he understood how dramatically it departed from everything he considered appropriate for his daughter. Frank's Fury. February 1966. Frank Sinatra's reaction to "These Boots Are Made for Walkin" was explosive and immediate. When he heard advance copies of the song in early February 1966, Frank realized that his daughter had not just recorded inappropriate material, she had created a direct challenge to his authority and values. The confrontation took place at Frank's Palm Springs compound, where Nancy had been summoned to explain her new direction. Frank was furious not just about the song itself, but about what it represented: his loss of control over his daughter's career and image. "This isn't music, it's trash," Frank screamed at Nancy during their confrontation. "You're my daughter, not some cheap nightclub singer. How can you put your name on something like this? How can you embarrass the family this way?" Nancy's response shocked Frank with its directness and defiance. For the first time in her life, she stood up to her father and refused to back down from her artistic choices. "I'm 25 years old, and I'm tired of asking your permission for everything," Nancy shot back. "This is my career, not yours. I'm not going to spend my life being your little girl." The argument escalated as Frank threatened to use his industry influence to prevent the song's release, while Nancy made it clear that she would leave Reprise Records and sign with another label if necessary. Both father and daughter understood that this confrontation was about more than just one song. It was about Nancy's right to adult independence. Frank couldn't believe that Nancy was willing to risk their relationship over a song, recalled a family friend who witnessed part of the confrontation. He had always assumed that Nancy's loyalty to the family would override any career ambitions, but he discovered that his daughter was stronger and more independent than he had ever imagined. The confrontation ended with Frank storming out, making it clear that he would not support the song's release and that Nancy was choosing her career over her family. Nancy was devastated by her father's reaction, but determined to proceed with the release, regardless of the personal cost. The rift between Frank and Nancy became immediately apparent to everyone in their professional and social circles. Frank refused to discuss Nancy's new direction and made it clear that he disapproved of her choices, while Nancy proceeded with promotional activities that further emphasized her transformation from good daughter to independent woman. The success and the cost. March 1966. These Boots Are Made for Walkin was released in February 1966 and became an immediate sensation, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and establishing Nancy as a major recording artist, independent of her father's influence. The song's success vindicated Nancy's artistic rebellion, but came at enormous personal cost. The success was everything Nancy had hoped for, and Frank had feared. The song connected with audiences precisely because of its defiant attitude and Nancy's confident delivery. Young women embraced Nancy as a symbol of independence and rebellion, while the song's catchy melody and distinctive arrangement made it a crossover hit that appealed to diverse audiences. However, the song's success also confirmed Frank's worst fears about his daughter's new direction. Nancy's performances of the song, particularly on television, featured the short skirts and provocative styling that Frank had always forbidden. The visual presentation was as important as the music in establishing Nancy's new image as a confident, sexy performer. The family relationship continued to deteriorate as Nancy's success grew. Frank refused to attend Nancy's performances or publicly support her career, creating a painful situation where Nancy was achieving everything she had dreamed of professionally, while losing the approval of the person whose opinion mattered most to her. Nancy was thrilled about her success, but heartbroken about her father's reaction, recalled Nancy's friend Tina Sinatra years later. She had wanted to prove herself as an artist, but she hadn't anticipated how much it would hurt to have Frank disapprove of everything she had accomplished. The media attention surrounding Nancy's transformation and her apparent estrangement from Frank created additional pressure for both father and daughter. Entertainment journalists began writing about the family rift, turning Nancy's artistic rebellion into public drama that neither she nor Frank had wanted. The success of These Boots led to additional hits that further established Nancy's independent career, including Sugartown and Something Stupid. Ironically, a duet with Frank that temporarily reconciled them professionally. However, the personal relationship remained strained, as both father and daughter struggled to accept the new dynamic between them. The Long-Term Consequences, 1967 to 1998. The rebellion that began with "These Boots Are Made for Walkin" fundamentally changed the relationship between Frank and Nancy Sinatra for the rest of their lives. While they eventually reconciled personally and professionally, the dynamic between them was never the same as it had been before Nancy's assertion of independence. Frank gradually came to accept Nancy's career choices and even expressed pride in her success. But he never fully embraced the image transformation that had made her famous. The traditional father who had wanted his daughter to be a conservative reflection of family values struggled to celebrate the sexy, confident performer that Nancy had become. Nancy continued to build her independent career while working to maintain her relationship with Frank. The success of These Boots led to acting opportunities, television appearances, and a lasting place in popular culture as a symbol of 1960s female empowerment. However, Nancy always carried the emotional cost of having disappointed her father during her breakthrough moment. The song itself became a feminist anthem that transcended its original context as a daughter's rebellion against parental control. These Boots Are Made for Walkin' represented broader cultural changes about women's rights to independence, sexuality, and career ambition that were transforming American society during the 1960s. Frank's reaction to Nancy's rebellion also reflected the broader generational conflicts of the 1960s, as traditional parents struggled to understand and accept their children's rejection of conservative values. The Sinatra family drama played out similar conflicts that were occurring in families throughout America, as young people asserted independence from parental expectations. The professional relationship between Frank and Nancy eventually recovered, with Nancy appearing on Frank's television specials and recording additional duets. However, Both father and daughter understood that their relationship had been permanently changed by Nancy's decision to choose career independence over family approval. Legacy of the Rebellion. Nancy Sinatra's rebellion against her father's control represents one of the most significant examples of artistic independence overcoming family expectations in entertainment history. The success of These Boots Are Made for Walkin' proved that Nancy could achieve success on her own terms, rather than as Frank Sinatra's obedient daughter. The song's lasting cultural impact extends far beyond its immediate commercial success. These boots became a template for female empowerment songs and influenced generations of women artists who wanted to project confidence and independence. The song continues to be used in movies, television, and advertising as a symbol of female strength and determination. From a family perspective, Nancy's rebellion demonstrated the complex challenges facing children of famous parents who want to establish independent careers and identities. The conflict between family loyalty and personal ambition that Nancy experienced continues to affect celebrity families today. The relationship between Frank and Nancy also illustrates the broader cultural tensions of the 1960s, as traditional values about family roles and appropriate behavior were challenged by younger generations who wanted more freedom to make their own choices about careers, relationships, and personal presentation. Nancy's decision to risk her relationship with Frank for artistic independence ultimately benefited both father and daughter. Nancy achieved the career success that had eluded her when she was trying to meet Frank's expectations, while Frank learned to respect his daughter's strength and independence, even when he didn't fully approve of her choices. The story of Nancy Sinatra's rebellion reminds us that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is accept their child's right to make independent choices, even when those choices conflict with parental values and expectations. The boots that Nancy wore while recording her Defiant anthem carried her not just to career success, but to an adult relationship with her father based on mutual respect rather than control. If this story moved you, subscribe to the Sinatra Lost Vault and hit that notification bell. We're revealing the family secrets that show the human side of America's most famous entertainer. What other hidden Sinatra family dramas do you want us to uncover? Let us know in the comments below.